Buongiorno.
Here we go. That getting that live transition was better than the one that I did yesterday with Jason. There were some bumps in the road getting the live going. This is the first Two Tongues main show that we've done live, so
it is.
We'll see how it goes.
This is an experiment in multiple ways. We have a spectator in the studio right now, my buddy Kevin, who's not on camera, but I'm just pointing that out for the audience just in case he's so compelled to chime in. And you guys remember Mortal Kombat?
I do.
You remember when you were fighting and you were kicking somebody's ass real good, and all of a sudden someone's head will pop up and say, Toasty!
Yeah.
Kevin. That's going to be Kevin at some point.
I wonder what the uppercut moment will be.
It's a good question.
We'll see. Stay tuned.
So I want to ask you about this. So Kyle went on had a live stream yesterday, which was the first live stream we've done on Two Tongues, with a associate from another podcast, the 2-Bit podcast.
Jason, from the 2-Bit podcast.
Yep. I got to see like the last 2 minutes of that stream.
I had the link pasted into our text, and I just apparently forgot to hit send. Like I said, I was flustered. I was like getting it figured out. So
I completely understand that. Yeah, man. How much preparation did you do before you did that podcast?
I got a lot of stuff on Melon set up. Like, it looks a little bit different.
Yep.
I was doing a lot of that stuff before. As far as like preparation for the conversation, I wanted to talk to Jason about Orthodox Christianity, and I know that he's a smart guy and well informed on that. So I have questions, so I wasn't really. I had like a basic outline of stuff that I wanted to talk about.
First of all, I want to say, God damn it, Kyle! It says fat Chad on my thing. It's supposed to say my Twitter handle. We're both base fat Chad.
I forgot to hit
we
that.
could both be base fat Chad, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what was interesting to me about that whole conversation and that video you sent me of Harry and
David Patrick Harry and Matt Erickson,
that guy,
is
that they were talking about finding their way to Orthodox Christianity, which is a path that you're on, which blows my mind, through politics. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't even compute to me. I don't understand that at all.
That's kind of how I came into it.
I know. Yeah. And I don't understand. That's what I want to ask you about. So he said, not Harry, but the other guy whose name I've forgotten already.
Matt
Erickson. He said that he was an anarcho-capitalist. So were you at some point. And I'm pretty sure he mentioned libertarianism. Pretty sure. Mm-hmm. Maybe not.
Yeah, he was active in the libertarian.
That's right. Yeah. And so that describes my political awakening.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get from politics to Orthodox Christianity? Help me out.
From realizing that the Western liberal tradition is Christianity that replaces Christ with some abstract idea of the individual.
Okay, so what registers to me there is the Constitution, the way that the founding fathers described individuals being what does Jordan Peterson say? The locus of responsibility, the locus of sovereignty. And that was another thing. I can't remember who said it now, but somebody said that every individual can't be sovereign because that flies in the face of what sovereignty means. And there's so much about like my immediate response to that recoils from that because I do think that peace and prosperity are best achieved when people consider the individual to be the locus of responsibility and action in the world, not the collective. We've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. But I do think that we're made in the image of God, which an Orthodox person would agree with. I do think that makes us sacred as individuals, and we have a responsibility to protect, individual liberty and freedom for that reason. Mm. You might say also as a buffer against totalitarianism, but I think you don't step on my toes because I'm sacred. My soul is sacred, and so is yours.
So if you have, and this doesn't even apply to Orthodox Christianity. This applies to like any idea, like framework for idea, like an idea to like base your life around, any kind of code. If you have a code and you truly believe that living by that code, will make your life better and the world better, I don't want to be too draconian with things, but I do think that giving people incentives to abide by that code is good. And I think that if you I feel like we've gotten to a point where they are encouraging people to live outside of that code.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And that's what I have a problem with. That's what I would like to dial back in the world. You know, I think that people hear that sort of thing and they think, complete terror. And that's not really what I'm looking for. And if you read the Bible, I don't think that that's what Jesus was advocating for,
So let me step in and try to say this in my own words. You tell me if I'm getting this right. So there's one way of looking at the individual as the locus of responsibility and action, like I was talking about. But there's another way of looking at the individual, saying that if the individual is the only important thing or the most important thing, then they make their own rules and their own values, and nobody can say differently because everyone's their own individual. And I see that as a problem. I can see that as a problem because, to your point, you have rules, social etiquette, laws, things like that that are supposed to apply to everyone. And if you say the laws don't apply to me because I'm my own individual, and morality is subjective and blah 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 blah, then that's a recipe for disaster. Really, that's going to be decohesive to society, and you end up with a bunch of people like we saw during the riots.
Mm-hmm.
So just fucking morally justifiable. In fact, morally admirable because I'm stealing a television.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what else to say about that.
If I'm on the right track, then if I'm starting to pick it up, then so is the idea then that if the authority of the government can be dismissed or undermined because it's not, let's say, the law of God, which you wouldn't be able to trespass against, is that the benefit of an Orthodox perspective? Is that all of these religious rules, because they come from God, apply to everyone, regardless of the situation, and you can't step on those rules the way that you might, like what's happening with the laws in this country. People are able to avoid obeying the laws, and they're not punished. In fact, they're praised for it. That you can't have that situation if the law of God. Is it something like that?
Something like that. There's one thing that I took from Thaddeus Russell. He talked about.
Will you turn your mic towards you a little bit? Sorry. Yeah, like that.
So fucking just don't want to move it because of the cameras. What was I saying? Oh, Thaddeus Russell. Yeah. He talked about living in a monarchy. One of the advantages of that, like people just have immediately, they're like, oh, a king, that's a terrible idea.
Yep.
But especially back in the day when there was like basically one guy in power. I mean, I know he's got people who work for him, subordinates and whatever.
The king does have people.
He called it living in the shade. It's like, as long as you're not like out there boastfully, putting it out there for the world to see, like nobody really cares,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's definitely some truth in that. It's like, you think about like a pride parade. We've talked about this before.
Yep. I
don't think it's appropriate for dudes to be, butt fucking each other on the street. I don't think that that's good. There are kids at those parades, even if there's not kids at those parades, it's common decency. I don't think it's good for a guy to be having sex with a woman in public. I don't, it's not about it being gay.
Except for at Mardi Gras, then it's fine.
If
there's bead necklaces, though, then it's fine. I'm pretty sure those are the rules of America.
Are the rules.
Yeah.
Oh, those are the rules of America.
Yep.
I just don't really like the rules of America.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that we glorify all like the weirdest things. I'm not a fan of just like the blatant sexuality in society, the sexualizing of kids. It's all fucking weird.
That's fucking weird. Listen, this is probably an inappropriate thing to insert in this conversation, and it's probably an inappropriate thing to bring up because of the cultural changes that have happened since this. But I'm reminded, when you talk about pride parades, I'm reminded of Eddie Murphy's stand-up from back in the day. I don't remember if it was Raw or Delirious, but do you remember this scene?
Which color was the leather suit he was wearing?
I think it was red.
It was red. Okay, so I think that was Raw.
I think it was Raw. Okay, so do you remember he said that he made jokes about homosexuals, and he said that the gay community was very upset with him, and he said that he has to go to San Francisco for a show, and he says he shows up at the airport. There's like extra security for him, and it's like there was really danger involved because people were mad he made these gay jokes, and that was in the 80s.
Yeah,
but the punchline basically is Eddie Murphy's riding in his car to the venue, and he says suddenly he hears sirens behind him, and he feels like he's going to get pulled over, and the gays are coming for him, and he said then he turns around and looks at the sirens, and all it is a gay guy with his shirt off hanging out of the back of the car going woo woo woo. You remember that?
I do vaguely. I remember the gay material, but I don't specifically remember that joke.
I remember he was walking up across the stage, and he kept turning his butt away from the audience. Like, don't look at my butt. Yeah. Eddie Murphy had a terrific butt back then, by the way.
Eddie Murphy was so fucking funny, man.
Yeah. I wonder if it holds up. I mean, Raw holds up, but I know we're getting off topic, but I wonder if some of the early movies like Beverly Hills Cop, if we watched them today, if they would hold up. I wonder if that whole buddy cop, white cop, black cop thing would hold up.
Yeah.
It might even be better today because of all the racial tensions, you know?
That would be an interesting movie to watch to see the kind of humor they did, because it could be good. It could be very funny, or it could be just like the least funny thing you've ever seen in your life.
Hollywood, listen to me. Do not remake that movie. Please, God, do not. But if you do, make Eddie Murphy's character white and the other character black. Reverse the roles like you're doing, and then it'll be a hit on Netflix. I guarantee it.
What were we talking about before that?
Orthodox Christianity and the government. That's what it was. It was how do you tie those two together? How is it that your changing political opinions are connected to changing religious opinions? That's what I'd like to know.
Wait a minute. Can you say that again?
All right. So for the audience's sake, Kyle was an anarcho-capitalist when we started this podcast 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And, pretty staunch with some core libertarian principles like individual liberty and small government.
Well, I believe that, and I still believe this, that as far as the libertarian ideology goes, anarcho-capitalism is the truest form of libertarian ideology. Like,
I don't disagree. We've had this conversation before a couple of years ago, but what concerns me about that is the idea of no government and no like legal enforcement from like a federal authority. I'm afraid that things would fall to pieces immediately.
I completely agree with you now. Back then, I was all on board that train, but a lot of COVID, a lot of the riots. Would
you say you were more optimistic about were you naive? Did you think more people were thought like you, and that if the government went away, people would have to just be more responsible? And
I think that I thought, and I still do think that there's like a lot of valuable stuff in libertarianism and, anarcho-capitalism. I do think that like the idea of breaking things down to smaller levels of government is good. A lot of that stuff I still find valuable. So I do think that in that situation, there would be areas that probably could get it together,
Oh yeah.
But I think that a lot of the cohesion in the world would be gone, between New York and Chicago, maybe some areas could get that together, but would they be able to travel through those areas to trade with each other, things like that? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there are some people that would rise to the occasion, and there are some people that wouldn't, and those people would be a cancer to the system. And I've said this before, but it's like if you have people who adopt that survival strategy, which is the parasite strategy, you're always going to have some of them. Some of them will rise to the occasion. Some of them will be like, hey, 90% of the people are doing it. I'm going to figure out a way to get a free lunch. And those people are the equivalent of a cancerous fucking tumor in a biological system,
Yep.
A little bit isn't going to kill you, but you let that shit go unchecked long enough, you are gonzo, man.
Go to the doctor. Go to the doctor, people.
Hey, man, speaking of the doctor, I told you, this is a weird thing to talk about on the podcast. I told you a couple of months ago that I had some pain in my testicle.
One of them
in particular. Anyway, it freaked me out, but it went away. So I was just like, oh, thank God. I don't have to go to the doctor. I'm fine. But just every now and then, just be a little achy, man. That same testicle.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried about it. So I'm saying it out loud.
Go to the doctor.
I hate the doctor so much.
If it really worries you, though. You get aching in them from time to time. It happens.
I make all kinds of excuses to myself. I even told my wife the other day, I said, like you get older and your testicles will hang more than they used to.
Yeah.
And I just imagine there's a lot more movement. There's a lot more tugging that, just from gravity and all that. Or, God forbid you sit on them, Yeah. You ever scoot across to something and next thing you know, you're sitting on your own balls?
Not really, man. I wear good underwear. Like
True.
I'm not like hanging all over the place. I got a good balls ear. What is that from?
Balls ear?
Yeah, it's like brassiere.
Oh, yeah,
it's from some show.
I can't remember.
Ear.
Kevin, what's it from?
No idea.
He doesn't know. All right. So anyway, while you were an anarcho-capitalist, you were more sympathetic to atheism. You were
yeah.
You were starting to come out of it, but you were more sympathetic to it than you are today.
Oh, for sure.
So there's a connection between your religious opinions changing and your political opinions changing, and I'm still trying to understand that.
Yeah, I don't think that I understand it that well yet. I guess it's just that I have standards, for lack of a better word, that I would like. That if I'm going to be part of a society, that I would like for that society to meet those standards. I'm not saying that everyone in the world has to abide by my standards, but I am saying that everyone in my society, I would like them to abide by those standards.
So are those standards something that you identified over the course of your life? Naturally you decided these are the things?
There were points in my life where I didn't even, I think, when I was younger, I was much more liberal. When I first came into libertarianism, I kind of came into it because it's like, leave people alone, man. They can do whatever they want, man. And now it's like, yeah, I think a lot of the time you should leave people alone. But if I come over to your house and you're about to shoot up heroin, I'm going to smack you in the face and I'm not going to let you do it. That's like, if I love, I'm going to do the most that I can to prevent the people I love from hurting themselves. Yeah. Eventually you can't do anything.
It's funny because you know what strikes me when you say that? Immediately I'm like, bitch, let that person do heroin in their own house. It's their own house. But then as soon as you said it's someone I love, then I'm picturing myself with the needle and I'm thinking, smack me, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of, so love is the distinction to me. It's like, if it's a stranger, I don't feel the same compulsion.
I don't know. I don't feel it as strongly, but I don't want strangers to like kill them. Let's say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that is maybe a better comparison than heroin, but I don't know, we can just stick with it. No, I don't want strangers to be doing like all these people who are dying of fentanyl overdoses. That's not good. That sucks. That's terrible for their families. It's terrible for them.
Yeah. But what about, I just see Big Brother looming in that and a feeling, and I'm conflicted. So you remember when I asked you, we were talking about good and evil. And I said, if somebody isn't given the opportunity to overcome temptation, then overcoming it isn't valuable. So what I mean is, if we went around and got all the heroin up and we just flushed it down the collective toilet,
it's a big ass toilet,
then all of the people on fentanyl and heroin, all the people struggling with addiction in that way, do not have the opportunity to overcome that challenge or slay that particular dragon, like Jordan Peterson might say.
There's other dragons, dude.
Yeah, but the fact that they're clean and sober isn't by their choice, and that undermines the value of it to me in some way. I understand the greater good argument, but I'm real leery about that because it just sounds like Big Brother.
Do you think we should legalize heroin?
I haven't thought it through in detail, but I'm one of those people that thinks that drugs should be legal, period, full stop.
Yeah, I disagree on that one. You know, I think that
They should be
some
regulated
things
and
that
taxed.
are illegal now should be illegal, but other things, no, I don't really have a problem with them being, you know,
I think prostitution should be legal.
I don't.
I think drugs should be legal. Because those things are unique because they're transactional, you know? So I'll go back to this free market idea. I go back to this individual liberty idea. And I think I don't want a person who's hard up, a girl who's hard up or naive or dumb or something like that, to get wrapped up in a situation where they're selling their bodies and they're going to have, you know, let's say psychological trauma in the future, or a health problem, whatever. I completely understand that's terrible. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But if you're somebody who's an adult, who's in your right mind, who's decided that the risks are worth it, and this is the best opportunity for me, I'm gonna take some pipe from a stranger and get a big paycheck, and it's gonna be filmed. It's like, okay.
So we've gone from regular prostitution to like porn. Is what we're talking
just trying
about?
to make it as bad as possible, as an example.
Okay.
You know, so it's like not just transactional, but other people are going to watch it, and she's going to get paid for that too. Let's say.
So go ahead.
You know, you can see how that might be a lucrative thing, and if she's in her right mind and an adult and entering into it voluntarily, saying no to her, I cannot bring myself to agree that I should prevent her from doing that.
Okay.
Or him, if it could be a gigolo.
So again, that is fine with me that you feel that way. You don't have to be a part of the society that I'm building.
Yeah.
You know, like that is legitimately how I feel about it. I don't want to force everyone to think the way that I think, but what I want is to not have the society that I'm living in actively subverting the things that I believe.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on.
But excuse me, how do you control that when people's minds change, or when new people are born into the community, like every youthful generation who doesn't agree with their parents? In fact, specifically disagrees with everything their parents value.
I think that a lot of that.
You're going to kick them out of the community?
Yes.
I mean, okay.
I think that a lot of that would be not as big an issue without all of the constant propaganda that comes from everywhere.
And also a great deal more social pressure to conform in a community like that.
Sure.
Because if you don't follow the rules, you don't get to be part of the community.
Yeah. And you know, I say that, yes, you would kick people out, but you don't even have a problem with that. You have, you know, positively talked about similar systems.
Yes, but we're talking about children and parents being separated. And I'm like, you know, what are you going to do?
I mean, how old is a kid going to be when they decide that they're going to do that?
Well, how old were you when you fucking
I was like 15.
15 up to when? 25 maybe?
So what is the significance of that?
Well, I mean, if you want to keep adults in the community at 25, they're adults, but they're still naive. They're still fucking dumb as a box of hammers. You know, they're going to want to make mistakes. They're going to have that messianic complex where they think they can change the world for the better, and they're going to be short-sighted. You're going to say, you know, you guys can't be a part of this community until you grow up and you can come back. You know, it's like, you got to separate kids from parents.
It happens all the time. I mean,
but the fact that it happens, it's like, as a parent, I would agree with you that you got certain fundamental values that you want to maintain, and it seems like the best likelihood of maintaining them is to not allow subversive components in there. I 100% agree. But when the subversive components are your kids,
well, I just don't understand what would the scenario be where that it comes to that excommunication? In my mind, it's got to be pretty.
Like what if you had like a small community, and maybe the kids in the community represent, like the kids between the ages of 18 and 25, they represent like a quarter of the population, and they get to the age where they want to be politically active in the community. And suddenly you have a quarter of the population that are communists because they're kids and they think private property is a sham and we should all, you know, share and whatever. They have all those ideas. Then a quarter of the population on the committee wants to undermine in the worst possible way everything you stand for. What do you do?
I don't know. Like I said, I think that in a society where your ideas are not constantly being subverted, you would not have as much of that.
Could be.
Um,
I'm thinking about Amish people right now. Like, those kids are allowed to go out, Rumspringa, and then they come back and they have to obey the rules. And they seem to be pretty cohesive.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really recruit,
Yeah.
but that's exactly. I wonder if you can become Amish, like you probably can, but I just don't think they make it very easy on you.
Listen, this is going to be a Sober October challenge for Bert Kreischer and what's his name? What's the other one?
Tom Segura.
Tom Segura. Infiltrate the Amish. Shave off your mustache. Infiltrate the Amish for the whole month of October. That's what we want to see.
That would definitely be interesting. That would be. I wouldn't mind trying to infiltrate the Amish. Make like a vacation. Well, not a vacation. I don't know.
Listen, I told you on the podcast that I used to have these like romantic sort of fantasies about right around graduation time from high school. That I, like, some people wanted to like join the military, boys, like, I want to join the military. Fucking Kevin over here. I want to join the military. But I thought to myself, I'd like to go work on an Amish farm. I'd like to just go ask, like, hey, will you put me up just so I can live and experience this way of life, and I'll work really hard for you, and that'll be the payment for this. Can I just hang out for a month and like work on the farm just to see if I could do it,
Yeah.
Just see what it would be like.
I definitely get that. I would like to do the same kind of thing, even to this day, but to go back to what we were talking about, I don't know. I had something to say, but I lost it in your farm talk.
I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay. It happens.
I get real chatty.
It happens to the best of us.
Government. We're talking about the government. Orthodoxy in the government.
I wasn't anywhere near orthodoxy.
Oh.
So have you heard the saying? It's somebody's like third law of politics. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's any organization that is not explicitly right wing will become left wing.
Yep.
And that is like kind of the guiding principle of this. It's like, don't let people who are going to subvert your core beliefs into your community.
Yep.
I'm not saying, go communist style and put them up against the wall, but don't let them in. I that to me seems like common sense.
Yeah. I mean, I can get behind that. I don't think that there's anything that strikes me as objectionable about having a community that's, I don't want to say private, but you should be able to have a private community. And you guys in the community get to make the rules. So as you were talking, I was thinking about what like the propaganda was like when we were growing up. And I suppose that's the right word to use. How we were taught to be proud of America and what America had accomplished and America's position in the world and what America represents: land of the free, home of the brave, all that kind of stuff. And we felt, this is why when I was 18 years old, and during 9/11, let's say, where I was thinking to myself, let's be a Marine. Fucking Kevin over here. Let's be a Marine.
Excuse me.
And I could justify that. I could justify risking my life. I could justify, whatever pain and suffering it would have taken because I valued the country. And what we've seen since we were kids is a slow trickle of wearing down that respect. Now it's so bad that you can't even say I'm proud to be an American in certain contexts without getting scoffed at, without getting, maybe even assaulted, in certain parts of the country. And so seeing how different it is today from when we were kids makes me kind of understand your point about if you had a community where you were reinforcing those values strongly and you didn't have so much exposure to counter narratives, that kids would not only learn to appreciate those values the same way that you do, because that's how it was for us growing up. Go ahead.
I kind of think that since the Enlightenment, since the birth of liberalism, that I almost think that the point of it has been to erode erode the passing of tradition from generation to generation. And it's been extremely effective.
Yeah.
You know, whether they were doing it on purpose or not, they couldn't have done a better job.
So what comes to my mind is a Jordan Petersonism. So I want to say it. He calls culture the wisdom of our ancestors, the wisdom of our fathers, and that's something that, like, for most of human history, was the most valuable thing for us. The wisdom of our fathers, the wisdom of our ancestors, are the hard-won lessons. Like, you can imagine if you go back to the beginning of time, and human beings were trying to figure out what they could eat and what would poison them. Somebody had to die to figure that out. So the wisdom of your ancestors is something as basic as what can we eat and what can we not. But it's also, how should we govern ourselves? It's also, how should we punish dissidents? Or there's all kinds of things that were hard won over long stretches of time, and people suffered and died for those lessons. And so conservatives in general want to maintain the wisdom of our ancestors. And because that's attached so much to tribal people and nature worshiping religions, it's hard for me to understand how liberals can't see that better, because these are the environmentalists. These are the fucking, animists of our day. Why is it that they can't see that order and culture and tradition is valuable? And I think part of that is that the liberal tendency is for newness, for novelty, for a better way. Let's reinvent something. Let's improve the technology. Let's start over and, do it better this time.
I agree with you. But I also think that a lot of times people try to, and I'm going to go specifically with Christianity on this. People try to make it seem like Christians are not the innovators, like it's everyone else. It's the atheists, it's the materialists. They're all like living in reality. They're the ones moving things forward. But if you go back in history, that's not the truth. Everyone who pushed society forward was a Christian. I mean, not everyone, but tons of them. Isaac Newton, Christian. Yep. I mean, just like a huge list of people, Christians.
Richard the Lionheart, Christian.
Absolutely.
Killed all kinds of
spreading the word of the Lord, man.
Yep. Spreading the word of the Lord.
See,
one Arab life at a time.
I'm not for that. My past political inclination to be like anti-offensive war, I think that's completely supported by Christianity.
That's an interesting one, because I still have carryovers from my libertarian philosophical place that particularly disdains offensive war. And it goes back to like my Ron Paul sympathies. It goes back to my non-interventionist sympathies, which, by the way, was something I had on the list to talk about in case Kevin wanted to get involved, because he has a military background. But what was I saying?
Non-interventionism.
Yes,
Ron
yes.
Paul.
It has to do with, most of the history of our country was non-interventionist. I mean, we don't get me wrong, we've had war after war after war. I understand that. I'm not, naive in that way. But we haven't been eager to get involved, especially in Asia and in Europe. We haven't been eager to get involved, even in the Second World War, in the First World War. We waited a very long time to get involved. We would much rather just trade with each other and mutually benefit from it than getting like embroiled in like conflicts that we have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of people that would say that today. Like, what are we doing over there?
It's been a different world since the World Wars. We've been a lot more willing to, extend our power for reasons like, I don't know. I don't really know what the fuck that has to do with us.
Well, this idea of, what do they call that? They call that, it's not sphere of influence. It's, shit. Sometimes I can't find words.
What is it describing? I don't.
I've lost it.
Okay.
Don't put me on the spot. I'm embarrassed. I just wrote down spheres of influence, and it really fucked me up. Sorry, start over. In non-interventionism. So, damn it, excuse me. So we're spending so much money to have influence in different parts of the world. Lots of money.
Tons.
That's the part that I have a hard time justifying. Like, if we're spending trillions of dollars to have military bases in Germany and Korea and islands in the Pacific and, Cuba, for Christ's sake, it's like,
Cuba.
what might we have been able to accomplish if instead we bolstered up our defenses in this country by 25% and spent the rest of that money on whatever else we might need, you know, fixing Social Security, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. And to kind of tie it back into the religious aspect of it, we've talked about this before. The reason America has all these bases all around the world is to export our current religion, which is liberal democracy.
Yeah, and that's part of the propaganda that we learned growing up. We learned that even. It's like if we spread liberal democracy to backwards parts of the world, they will improve. They will adopt capitalism. They will become more wealthy. The crime levels will go down. The hunger levels will go down.
Then they can all be addicted to porn and, you know, antidepressants and fast food, and life's going to be great for them. You know,
those are excellent points, man. Those are unintended of shit. Don't ever. What would the world be like if it wasn't just the first world nations that were so prosperous that we were deeply depressed, deeply anxious, you know, addicted to
not reproducing anymore.
Not reproducing. Although I did see an article that said the average penis is getting longer. Did you see this article?
I did see that.
Like, I missed the fucking generational boat, dude. Man.
Yeah.
Where was I? Where was I when dicks were getting bigger?
I include myself in that study. So
yeah.
I
guess if you count gravity, I'm 25% bigger. If you count the effects of gravity.
Yeah.
That's what one of the reasons I really got to get rid of these man boobs before it gets too late.
Keto, baby.
I've been good, man. I've been trying to get back on the healthy wagon.
Me too. I just feel like motivated and like ready to go. You know what I'm saying?
I love that feeling because I know what you mean. That sort of inspiration where you feel like you're actually self-motivated. You're driven by something that you want so much. You're actually, you know, willing to do whatever it needs to be done. And you're kind of excited about it. And it lasts longer than a couple of hours. That's a brilliant, brilliant feeling. Is that tied into this religious exploration you're doing?
Yeah, I think so.
The health consciousness and the spiritual health consciousness?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know. The health is just kind of, I'm getting old, you know, like I got to start being better about some things, or, you know, if I get lucky, I might live long, but I also might not, you know? So I'm just very aware of that. So I'm trying to be better about things.
I'm getting more aware of that myself.
Yeah.
I started, you know, people said like when you reach 40, how much more difficult it is to lose weight, or how much more difficult it is to get in shape, you know? And I've been off the wagon, like lifting weights and trying to exercise for a while. And I've been trying to get into that. And dude, I am wrecked. My upper body right now is wrecked. My daughter, she wanted to sit on my lap and she put rested her head against my chest. And I was just like, ugh, wrecked. And it's like worse than it was when I was a younger man. Right. And I have to suffer through that until my body gets used to it. And this soreness and this like weakness isn't going to go away until I struggle through that. So I just trying to be disciplined about it and not let myself say no. I even took a walk on the treadmill, not a run because my legs were a little fucked, but I took a walk on the treadmill on a day I wouldn't ordinarily, because otherwise I'm sitting in this chair, you know, like I'm sedentary all the time. And I'm just like, no, you know, you got some time, just get, you know, and I'm gonna put a podcast in and do a little exercise. So I'm trying.
Yeah.
I just hope it doesn't slip, because it can slip so easily.
It does slip easy, man. One benefit that I have that you don't is that my job requires me to be up and moving and lifting heavy ass pieces of metal and shit like that. So I think I don't have as much of a problem with that, but I still need to be doing more, you know, for sure. I need to be doing more. I especially feel like maybe I should start. I've never been a big fan of it, but maybe I should start doing some like cardio, you know?
Yep. I would just say that at our age, like knees and ankles and stuff, that really starts to become a problem.
Oh yeah.
So
I think it's my left knee is a problem. Like it just starts hurting for no reason. Like I can't trace any particular event. It's not like I tripped and twisted it or something, but I'll wake up and it hurts.
Ease into it.
Yeah.
Do you find that those things happen more when you're eating carbohydrates? Or like, has it been better since you've been since you've been on keto?
So it's not like it's like an every other week thing. It's like maybe every 3 months. So it's hard to tell because I'm not that consistent with keto. At least I haven't been.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I can't really tell. I think a big thing for me is staying well hydrated. I noticed that a lot of things start going wrong when I'm not well hydrated.
Yep.
The water champ.
Because I'm trying to make sure that I have to pee real bad by the time we're done.
Yep. I didn't go before, so it might be a problem, but we're chugging along.
We're wasting too much time. We've got lots of stuff to get to. I want to ask you, when you were when you had what's the guy from 2Bit's name?
Jason.
When you had Jason on and you were talking to him, I just caught the very end and it was mostly him talking, not a whole lot of you. What did you ask him? What was I don't know, what was your favorite part of that conversation?
I asked him about his, how he came into Orthodoxy. And I asked him, I did get a little bit into theosis and stuff at the very end. Did you
No, I missed that. No? I missed that part. Yeah.
Yeah, but mainly it was him talking about his path to Orthodoxy and me talking about my, the path that I'm on into it right now.
Yep.
And, just listening to how, his story of the things that he was actually he was in it from early, not like really in it, but he was associated with it from an early age. So it was like a natural thing for him to go into.
Yeah, not for
which
you,
is
man.
not the case with a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I talk about who are in Orthodox Christianity, they came to it through some weird circuitous route. Like David Patrick Harry talked about, he was like researching psychedelics and, tripped across something about Orthodox Christianity. He was like, oh, I need to study that.
Yeah.
So, and that brought him into it.
So I need to also study it. I'm intrigued, well, partly because I had an experience at the Catholic Church, which showed me what Christian service could be like versus what I was accustomed to growing up.
You got to go to an Orthodox liturgy, man.
I do, yeah. I also started learning some shit about Buddhism that was kind of off-putting. Buddhism and Christianity, if I'm being honest, they're two areas that I haven't explored as much as I probably should have. And I love the story of Buddha. I'll tell that story on the podcast regularly. I think Buddhism is an interesting religion. But then somebody on Twitter that I talk to sometimes, Joe, told me that he was a Buddhist and that he was something called a Pure Land Buddhist. And I said, that's interesting.
What the fuck
what does that
Pure
mean?
Land Buddhist?
Right. So do you know, like, Buddhism has branches just like Islam has branches and Christianity has branches. You've heard of Zen Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, that kind of thing. I don't know what the distinction is. I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
So this guy's telling me that Pure Land Buddhism is one of the most common and it's like one of the largest branches. And then he describes to me that what makes the distinction, what makes Pure Land Buddhism is that they believe that in a state of meditation, you can reach a pure land. And there are more than one. It's not like there's just one option somehow. And so you basically can imagine like an out-of-body sort of experience where you can meditate to a point where you get to a state of mind where you're no longer on the earth, you're somewhere else. And in the somewhere else, you can encounter Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or whatever. And they can teach you how to become a Buddha. And what makes it important is that in the Pure Lands, you don't have any of the pain or suffering that you have on the earth. Mm-hmm. So it's easier for you in the Pure Land to understand the Buddhist teachings and to reach enlightenment. And then there's nirvana above and beyond that. So even the way I'm describing it to you, I've already been told is wrong, that that's not exactly the way they look at it, but I had never heard of this before, Pure Lands. And I was asking, what's the theological support for it? How do Buddhists believe that there are Pure Lands? Where does it come from? Was it a revelation somebody had? Did somebody go to the Pure Lands and come back and talk about it? How do we know there's more than one Pure Land? Is this like a different dimension? Is this like a higher realm of being, a state of mind? What is this? And anyway, anytime that I encounter something like that seems to me dogmatic, like, okay, somebody had an experience. And as a result of that, there's all these stories that have developed about some kind of like intermediary supernatural place that Buddhists can reach through meditation. And not only that, there's more than one of them. They have different qualities and different Buddhas live on them. And I'm like, immediately I start to think, this sounds like fucking Scientology. This sounds it just doesn't sound Buddhist to me. Like, I'm not a Buddhist, I don't know, but it doesn't sound right. When I think about the story of Buddha, and then I hear this story about some kind of like halfway house heavens that are available to us that somehow Buddhists live on. What are these? Are these other planets? Are these sort of intermediary reincarnation stopovers where somebody who's reached Buddhahood can exist on the Pure Lands? Like, I don't understand it.
So the caveats that you're giving for the Buddhism, let me say that I don't understand this either. This is a part of Orthodox Christianity, and a lot of the theology I don't know yet. You know, I'm excited to get into it, but I don't know it yet. But they have something, and it seems maybe it's completely non-analogous, and I'm just completely fucking this up. But they have something called toll houses that is like some kind of stop between heavens, you know, between you dying and going to heaven,
Yep.
you know, whatever that is.
Is the point of the toll house, is it a way of like purifying your spirit?
Maybe
as
some
you,
kind of, I don't know.
Okay.
But you know,
because that's how the Buddhists explain this, by the way, in a very similar way. It's described as an easier way to enlightenment, so that you can purify your mind, and that will make it easier for you to reach nirvana or something. It's just weird, man. It's like, you know, the same thing with Catholics. Talk about purgatory, limbo. You know, I've got Paradise Lost up here.
The fact that it's in all of all of those things have some version of that, does that make you wonder?
In a way, I'll tell you the mystical thing that comes to my mind. So it's like this: if somebody tells you that they've seen supernatural things above and beyond the ordinary, and that they can tell you details about how the soul is composed, like the ancient Egyptians believed there were different parts of the soul, the Ka, the Ba, all this stuff. If somebody tells you that they can describe to you that level of detail about how the soul is constructed, or they can tell you how the heavens are constructed, there's different levels of hell. Like I have the Divine Comedy over there on the bookshelf, or Paradise Lost by John Milton, that talk about how heaven and hell are constructed. You know, somebody who can tell you that level of detail is either some kind of a saint or full of shit.
Yeah.
And I lean towards the full of shit part. However, I've seen mystical things like the Kabbalah, as an example. This whole idea of the tree of life and the zephyrs and all the Sephirah and all this stuff. And it's like it relates to things like alchemy and things that are very like mystical and mysterious, where people will literally come up with these detailed models of spiritual realities. And I think that's interesting, but I'm very skeptical of it, man. Like if I go back to psychedelic experience and I think about images and things that come about in psychedelic experience, I might bring those back into my waking life and elucidate them and try to write everything down that I remembered and create this something that looks like the Kabbalah, like the tree of life in the Kabbalah. I can imagine doing something like that. What I can't imagine is understanding it well enough to understand what it means or to tell anybody else what it means.
Okay, I understand that. I also think that if you dedicated your life to, you know, understanding it, you know, if there's already some kind of like framework, like scripture, things like that, to really be in that and studying it and doing whatever kind of ritual or drug that you need to induce that, what I would call a revelatory experience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's revealed to you.
Sure. Yeah. So it's possible, I suppose, but I feel like the more you try to elucidate those things to make them cohesive and understandable to somebody, the more you are putting your own order into something that is chaos. You are constraining the truth to make it something that's entirely of your invention. And I do that all the time. And I still think it's useful to do that. So I'm a little bit talking out of both sides of my mouth here. But it's just like what the Taoists say. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the real Tao. So if I have an experience and I try to make sense of it and explain it to you, I'm telling you falsehood. Like the truth is the experience and only the experience. Any representation, if I try to tell you or write a picture, any representation of it is false. It might be like a shadow of the truth, but it's false.
Okay. Does that make it not valuable?
I don't think so. I think it is valuable.
Because I mean, I basically agree with you, even as specific as some things are. And I mean, I'm specifically talking about the Christian elements, even as specific as they are. If it is real, it's probably just some kind of like a vague shadow of what it actually is.
Yeah.
It's like describing to someone an acid trip. It's like when I went to see Camp Green Sky Festival and I was tripping on acid watching a band play, and just like the leaves on the trees are like,
fuck yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, you have some idea of what I'm talking about, but you will never be there. You will never experience that. And these saints and apostles who are being something a lot better than I can, like the stuff that I've experienced in psychedelic trips, they're doing a much better job than I am.
Yep.
But it's still not the real thing.
Yeah. It's and so when we talk about it being valuable, I'm trying to think of like an analogy. So imagine that you're like 12 years old and you've never felt romantic love. You felt love before, but never romantic love. You're not there yet. And your dad has the sex talk with you and he tells you about romantic love. And maybe he tells you his experience of it. He tells you what to look out for and, what to anticipate, whatever. He tries to help you out. He tells you what romantic love is all about. That isn't having romantic love. That's not having the feeling of it. In some way, it's totally false. And that kid doesn't even understand what the words mean exactly until he has that feeling, until he falls in love. Then he's like, okay, everything my dad says now makes sense. Is it helpful in that example to have heard from someone else what was going to happen to you? I think it,
even if it doesn't completely prepare you, you have some idea, maybe it's not going to, maybe it doesn't even help you that much, but I don't think it hurts you. It like gives you some kind of idea.
You know what it reminds, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You know what it reminds me of is the, what is it called?
I don't know.
The pyramid texts. So this is the oldest religious text that exists. They're carved into pyramids in Egypt. They're the oldest. And what they do is and this was common in ancient Egypt, they would put these sort of murals inside tombs that show, it's like the Egyptian Book of the Dead stuff, that show a soul how you get to heaven. It's like when you die, you're going to have to go through these trials. You're going to have to get judged by this committee of gods, and you have to answer the questions correctly and do these things correctly in order to get to the other side. And so it's like when you were alive, learning that you were going to have to do this thing before you could get to heaven. Then when you actually die and your soul is transmigrated or whatever it happens, is it useful for you to know that there's a journey after that, even if what's being described to you is not 100% true?
I don't know.
I think it probably is. I think at least it takes away like the surprise that you would have.
Yeah.
And with the romantic love example, the surprise of the new experience, how often does that like throw people? It's like you have a romantic feeling about somebody and you think, especially the first time, this is the woman I'm going to marry. Like, dude, you're 14. She's the one, because you're naive and the experience is new. It has so much more power. But if somebody told you ahead of time, you're going to be head over fucking heels. You're not going to be thinking straight. You're going to think whatever girl it is that touches your penis the first time is, a goddess manifest on earth. And that relationship is going to end. And you're going to feel similarly about every other girl that you ever strike up a relationship with. I don't know. I think it's still not true, but it's still valuable in some way. That's where I'm landing on this.
Yeah, I generally agree with you. I had something to say and I lost it.
God damn it. Sorry, man. You do the talking.
No, I just wish that I could remember that one thing. Well, it's gone.
It'll come back.
Maybe.
We talked about. Do you want to pivot to racism?
Yeah, let's pivot to racism.
All right.
Yeah, let's pull this Scott Adams video up. I'm sure some people know about this already. You have to start it from the tab.
All right. Do you want to set this up before we watch it?
So Scott Adams, I mean, we've talked about Scott Adams before. He's I think generally like a good-hearted guy. I don't think he's like got bad intentions for anyone. A couple of his takes recently have been not great, particularly having to do with things like the stabby, the coof prevention device. He was not great on that. And then once it became apparent that he was not great on that, he became even worse on it by being like, oh, no one could have known except all the people who did.
Yeah. So hold on. I wanted to explain to Kevin, who's not in camera. There are certain words you can't say on YouTube or you want to avoid saying. Otherwise, the video gets pulled down. And so if you want to say anything that has to do with a particular medical instance that was a rave across the country recently, that's a problem.
It was a rave.
That's why we're it was a super popular. Yeah. Everybody was talking about it. Yeah. So anyway, I want to add that the reason we talked about Scott Adams in the past is he's the cartoonist that writes the Dilbert comic, which is famous. It has been around a long time. But he also wrote a book called God's Debris, which our buddy Daniel Torridon from the UK, now of Australia, by the way, who told us about. We read it. We did some talked about it on the podcast. It was fantastic.
I would like to, because Daniel likes that book and, I think has some level of respect for Scott Adams, intellectual acumen. I would wonder what Daniel thinks about this. And I also wonder what Daniel thinks about Scott Adams' positions in general, because Scott Adams is kind of controversial,
I don't know if he always was, but he is now for sure, right?
He's pretty much always. I mean, when he was doing Dilbert, he was doing comics, and that's not that, But ever since he kind of has been Scott Adams and not just the cartoonist who does Dilbert, he got big for being a Trump supporter.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But he does do this thing, and I think it's probably what we're watching here. He does this thing. It's like Coffee with Scott Adams. He does it every morning.
Basically every day.
Every morning. So is that what we're going to see here?
Yep.
Okay. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go, guys. Let's watch Scott Adams and see what he has to say.
Well, Rasmussen poll had a provocative little poll today. They said, do you agree or disagree with the statement, it's okay to be white? That was an actual question. Rasmussen asked, white and black voters, and probably others, do you disagree or agree with the statement, it's okay to be white? 26% of blacks said no. It's not okay to be white.
Jesus.
21% weren't sure. Add them together, that is 47% of black respondents were not willing to say it's okay to be white. That's like a real poll. This just happened. Did you have any idea?
Hit pause.
Would you have imagined that could have happened?
Do it over there.
All right, what's up?
He says there, can you imagine? I can. Like, he seems like this is new information to him. And I've not seen that particular poll, but just looking at society, looking at the way people talk on the news, looking at, and on the news, I'm talking about like, people who have much more of an influence in shaping culture. And on social media, I'm talking about people who consume that culture and act it out in the world. This doesn't surprise me at all.
So I think, like, as an optimist, and I consider myself to be more of an optimist, and that's made me a naive human being for my life. I still struggle with that. I'll be perfectly honest about that. As an optimist, I look at this and think to myself, there's a difference between thinking that, let's just talk about black people specifically here. It's different to say that black people were historically marginalized, and so so the majority population, in this case, white people, have some obligation to remedy those historical, disadvantages. There's one thing to say something like that. That's like an affirmative action type of a stance. It's another thing to say that trying to restore what we perceive to have taken from Black people means that somehow white people now are to be
Demonized.
Demonized. That's a great word to put it. It's one thing to say we owe, as a society, Black people something as a remedy for historical wrongdoings. I don't 100% agree with that, but it's one thing to take that position. It's not. There's a huge gap between that position and white people, are evil, or white people.
It's not okay to be.
It's not okay to be white.
Yeah. What the fuck does that even mean?
I have no idea.
If you're white, you should kill yourself. What is the implication?
The implication is terrible. It's things you can't say out loud. To say that it's not okay to be white means that we should have less white people or none. And that implies that we should either excommunicate them or have them killed.
Kind of mean, Mr. Mustachey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, but continuing to foster this idea that white people owe Black people something, and that we as a group collectively are responsible for their hardships and disadvantages even today. That's a very dangerous and completely ridiculous thing to perpetuate. And that's exactly what we're doing. I think that something is on the surface, maybe as I don't even know if this is not fair to say, but if we can talk about affirmative action for a second, if we say that, oh boy, it's such a slippery conversation to even start.
Yeah, but I love the slippery. Like slippery in what way? Like you're worried to say something that's going to get you in trouble?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think there's some of that.
So that's one thing that I am proud of Scott Adams for here. He's caught in flack for this. I'm surprised the stream isn't taken down. I'm surprised. A lot of people were like, he's going to walk this back. He's going to, but to my knowledge, he hasn't.
What we're doing in this country for the sake of equity and inclusion, let's say, what we're doing in this country for those ends is similar to yelling fire in a crowded theater in terms of what we're doing to the white population. And I've seen those many videos recently of Black kids beating up white kids, of Black people beating up some white person on the bus. I don't know. Obviously, you don't see the context. You don't know what happened. But in many cases, especially the one that most recently of this much larger Black kid, or maybe it was a Black chick, beating this white kid on the bus ruthlessly.
I saw that.
And his hands are the whole time ruthlessly. I have a hard time thinking that kind of behavior doesn't have something to do with the cultural position that whiteness is bad.
So to bring this to a personal level, I don't want to get too specific, but I've had a person who's very close to me and is young. So, he's not like a teenager or anything, but he's younger.
I know who it is.
Yeah. Who, because he's young, just like leans a little bit more liberal, progressive.
Sure.
And I actually, like almost 10 years ago, he was saying something that at that point I was like, dude, that's racist. What are you doing? And it my ideas on what is and isn't racist is completely different now. But, I basically coached him like, don't be racist, and I don't regret that. I think that that's a good thing to learn, but I do think that eventually, like I said, your understanding of what is and isn't racist needs to develop some. It's good to want to be fair to people.
Yep.
But you have to carry that through logically all the way through for everyone.
Yep.
So he, like I said, he leans a little bit more in the progressive kind of thing racially. And I think that is partially my doing because of that little coaching session that I had with him.
Yeah.
But recently he's had an experience that I think maybe makes him see the reality of what things are. And he has a friend. He works with a friend who is a Black guy. And I like the guy. He's a nice guy. He's, funny.
Yeah.
not the greatest worker in the world, though. We'll put it that way. He's a good worker, but he leaves a lot to be desired, and he doesn't really hide that either. Like managers, everyone sees these areas where he's lacking. And he says to my brother that he thinks the reason that he's not advancing more in the company is because he's black and that the company is racist. The vice president of the company is black. The guy who manages the shop floor is black. There are more black and Puerto Rican people who work at that shop than white people.
Yep.
To say that that place is racist is retarded.
Yep.
And I'm not a manager. I see this guy texting on the clock all the time. Of course you're not getting promoted.
Yep.
Of course you're not getting a raise.
And if you told him that, you'd be the racist.
And that's what happened.
Oh,
Colin,
God.
yeah, Colin,
Oh God.
I have this thing where it's like, I tend to keep my mouth shut in real life because I don't want to get fucking fired. If this dude is like, hey, this guy's a racist, I'm fucking fired because I'm not a racist.
Yep.
And luckily that him and Colin have they are friends, so it didn't come to that, but they definitely took a hit. And that guy went and told another guy, and now that guy doesn't he doesn't fuck with him, So
you were talking, remember what was it in Mississippi when the first school was integrated? There's like a name for it, like the Mississippi 7 or something. I can't remember, but there's a video of this little black girl walking up the steps into the white school for the first time, and the National Guard is standing along both sides to protect the black students who are walking into the school because the white people are so upset that they're integrating the schools. These kids, the perception was that they were in danger, that they were at risk of getting beat up or killed or something. So the National Guard was there to protect them. Do you know this? Is this ringing a bell to you?
Vaguely, yeah.
So there's an image of this little girl. She's probably like 7, 8 years old, walking up the steps to this in school, and just all these fucking army men, right? All these National Guardmen.
You said this is from like the 60s or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I just didn't catch the time frame.
Yep. So I'm comparing this picture of integration of schools where black kids are being allowed to come to the white schools and what society's doing to make sure this happens. I'm contrasting that to what's happening today with the black kid beating the absolute piss out of this white kid on the bus, seemingly for no fucking reason, when he's way younger and way smaller than you.
What could the reason have been? I mean,
I don't know, but it's like nobody is standing up to protect that kid. And in fact, all of the other kids, and in particular the white kids, who might stand up to say, hey, what are you doing? Yeah, they're not only are they are scared, but the question is, why are they scared?
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily they're afraid that they're going to get beaten up or something, but they're afraid that if I stand up and punch this person of color in the face, I'm going to be painted as a racist. Like, I might go to fucking jail.
Correct. There's way, way, way worse social repercussions for the white kid hitting the black kid than for the black kid who started it, beating the absolute shit out of this defenseless white kid.
He didn't do
Why is there such a difference? Why is it okay in one case and not in the other, or less bad in one case than the other? That sort of equity that we're talking about is absolute bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's causing schools to start segregating kids again. They're having classes where the black kids and white kids are separated now. What in the fuck are we doing? Do we want to have a black water fountain again? Do we want to do that? That's what the liberals want. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievably racist what's happening, and nobody wants to say shit, because if you do, you're fucking racist for saying it.
You know what though? Like, honestly, if you go back to the thing I was talking about with people should be able to associate with each other and build their own societies and shit like that. If black people want to go build a black society and not allow anyone else in, that's fine. The problem is that if white people said they wanted to do that, obviously, you're talking about white nationalism, which is a huge problem.
Or David Koresh, and we all know what happened to David Koresh, Branch Davidians. Yeah.
We do know what happened.
We do, and it wasn't good.
Wasn't good. Lots of kids died.
You want to get back to this video? Sorry.
No, we're good. Yeah, we can.
I want to hear what this guy has to say.
So I realized, as you know, I've been identifying as black for a while, years now, because I like to be on the winning team, and I like to help. And I always thought, well, if you help the black community, that's sort of the biggest lever. You can find the biggest benefit. So I thought, well, that's the hardest thing and the biggest benefit. So I'd like to focus a lot of my life resources in helping black Americans. So much so that I started identifying as black to just be on the team I was helping. But it turns out that nearly half of that team
for a second.
Yeah, that's
doesn't.
So this, I clearly, so he's saying he now identifies as black.
yeah, he's
to be
being kind of tongue in cheek.
yeah, he's being kind of. How do you feel about that?
I just don't really take it that seriously. I mean, he says I identify as black because I want to be on the winning team, and I think that there are interesting implications to that, like the things that we were just talking about. I think that's kind of what he's alluding to there, the equity of certain people being held to higher standards than other people, which is completely fucked.
Do you see this? I mean, I know you probably do, but do you see this as like intentionally dehumanizing white people? The way that we did, let's say, in Vietnam, when in order to get white soldiers to take lives, I'm not including myself in this, but the United States military brainwashed, I think that's the appropriate word, soldiers to think that
Like
they were
cockroaches.
less human.
Yeah.
Same thing Hitler did when he talked about hygiene and purity of genes. The more you dehumanize another group, the easier it is to mistreat them, and that's what we're doing in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And the strangest part about it is, white people are the majority.
Yeah.
And we're doing it to ourselves.
That's the thing I said at one point to the person I was talking about earlier is, I have some kind of sympathy for black people who feel that way because they've been raised their entire lives. White people are, a lot of them, white people are evil. Don't trust white people, blah, 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 blah. So if you're raised being told that by the people who you look up to and admire, you're gonna think that. And no matter how much I treat you with respect and kindness and courtesy, if I say anything that you disagree with, suddenly I become racist. It's like that doesn't line up with our relationship,
Right.
But so again, I kind of understand where black people are coming from. I don't agree with them, but I know why they think it.
Does that remind you of like the way that Israeli and Arab kids are like?
I don't know. But the thing that I said to that person is, you're going to find out that a lot of your white friends feel the exact same way. That if you say anything, if you start talking about these things, they're going to throw you under the bus. They're going to, basically, yeah, white people, a lot of white people have internalized this and be like, yeah, we're bad, which is, I really don't even know what to think about it. I guess I should be able to understand it more because I used to be sort of sympathetic to that like a decade ago,
It reminds me of those Christians in the Middle Ages during the plague that were walking around from village to village, self-flagellating themselves, whipping themselves because they needed to suffer and bleed in order for God to relieve them of the plague. It's like you've got this idea in your head that you're the problem and you're going to punish yourself to try to fix the problem, and it's completely irrational.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to speak on that that like level of religious fervor, but I do think, and also like something like the plague. I don't know. I have a hard time with a lot of people who are like, God sends plagues and hurricanes, although it's pretty explicit about that in the Bible, but a lot of other things. Like issues that we have in society, whether you think about it as God sending it or not, whether it's just a consequence of your own actions, that seems a completely meaningless distinction to me, because you're behaving in these ways they have consequences. Your actions have consequences, and you put yourself in this state by your own actions where you are miserable. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that really, but
it's just a strange thing, man. It's a strange thing. And the strangest part about it, like I said, is the fact that white people are a majority population. So it's like when you have that advantage, quote unquote advantage in a society. You don't have to self-flagellate. You don't have to, but we're choosing to, we're making ourselves the enemy. And it makes me wonder, you know how people say that like white women.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's what I was getting at. It's like, I do think that there's some value in maybe not like flagellation. Although I don't know, I'm not that deep into it, but I do think that there's some kind of, you need to suffer, like you need to get yourself back to a place where you appreciate the good things, where to acknowledge that the path you were on was not good. And sometimes I think that just those consequences, that can be the flagellation, and then you see the light that it's like, I can't be doing that's, I feel like I've been on that path, that I was making all these decisions. I was espousing ideas and then not living up to them in my real life, and I became fucking miserable and depressed. And the last year of my life has not been great. And the last 3 months of my life have been particularly fucking rough. And I'm just like, it just hit me. This is all my fault. So, that's my flagellation this last year. And, 3 months particularly that's been me walking around, slapping myself in the back with the rope.
You're right about that, man. That's good. That's a good way of putting it. And the analogy to the society is interesting. Like we're doing this to ourselves, and it seems like we're doing it for the purpose of suffering. Like if we bring the society down, which we seem to be doing everything we can to collapse it, then we're going to force ourselves to suffer. Then we're going to have perspective that we didn't have while we were flourishing, and then we can fix the problem. It's very interesting, man. Like, why do we have to suffer? Why do we have to tear things down to learn the lesson we need to get back to where we need to be? It's weird, man. It's like Jordan Peterson in Maps of Meaning talking about having a little death. And he's like, you have a little psychological death. So when you run into the chaos and you find yourself in a situation where nothing makes sense and you're scared and don't know what to do and all that sort of thing, it's always better to have those events happen when they're small, rather than waiting for them to build up to something big. Then you have a catastrophic collapse and you may not be able to resurrect yourself then. You need little deaths, and then you make little adjustments. You don't want a big fucking death,
Yep.
Are we done? Are we done with this video?
I think there's a little bit more.
Do you want to?
Yeah, let's see what else he says. It's not a very long clip.
I'm okay to be white, which is, of course, why I identified as black, so I could be on the winning team for a while. But I have to say, this is the first political poll that ever changed my activities. I don't know that that's ever happened before. Normally you see a poll, you just look at it, you go, whatever. Oh, this is interesting what other people think. But as of today, I'm going to re-identify as white because I don't want to be a member of a hate group. I'd accidentally joined a hate group. So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say...
Up there for a second. If the poll is to be believed, if it's true that nearly 50% of black people, when asked, is it okay to be white, either said no or I'm not sure. That's seriously fucked up. That is like...
Put the shoe on the other foot and it's like immediately fucked up.
Overwhelming racism. Like, I can't even... I don't even know if in Nazi Germany... At the height of Nazi Germany, when they were putting Jews into train cars and taking them away, if 50% of the German population would have said, it's not okay to be Jewish. Maybe, but that's the kind of comparison that we're making. It's terrible.
Yeah. We don't have to watch any more of this. Okay. That's basically it.
All right. Well, let's just stop the share. Okay. And we're back.
So what else we got?
Well, shit. Well, we didn't talk about anything on my list. I have something for you. You remember how we were talking about like how to brand the podcast and how trying to find some thread that we can use. And one of the things that you coined when we first set this podcast up was that we were hoping to have an experiment in conversation. And so part of this is you and I, lifelong friends, having these conversations once a week about, personal topics, but also, topical things. And as we grow up, our minds change, and we're not identical people, although we grew up together. So we're in this unique position where we kind of share a mutual history and we know each other really well, but we have our differences. And that's what makes this fun. Proving to the world that people who don't always agree can have productive conversations and interesting conversations.
Helps if they've been friends for over 30 years. You
does,
tend
yeah.
to be more accepting of those people.
But we do also like to have people on the podcast, other people, to talk about that, like we did with John way back when, and we did with Daniel, and we became good friends with Daniel.
Yep.
And that kind of thing. So I had this idea, experiment in conversation is good, and I think we should keep that. But as far as my solo podcast go, I'm like doing like I don't know what you'd call it. I'm doing kind of like a lecture. Teaching and learning is what I'm doing. You know how like in newspapers, you've got your regular articles, and then you have your op-eds.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who don't know, opinion editorials are like, how can we talk about the news, but in a way that's not objective? It doesn't have to be objective. It could be my opinion. Well, that's kind of what the news has become, right? Every single channel you turn on is op-eds.
Yeah.
But in the old days, newspapers had a section for it. You would get an opinion piece, and it would be exactly that. I'm not trying to be objective. I'm not trying to tell you the facts. I'm trying to tell you the opinion. So I had this sort of idea. It's like, that's what I'm doing. When I do my solo podcast, I'm not doing teaching. I'm doing opinion teaching. So this is what I was thinking. How do you phrase a ship?
There's something to that.
There might be something to that.
I don't know how you like you like, welcome to the Two Tongues podcast, my solo episode, opinion scholarship, or whatever you said.
Yeah, opinion scholarship. I just think that phrase is appropriate for what I'm doing, and I got to figure out a way of like making it a catchphrase.
Coin it, yeah.
Opinion scholarship. That's what I'm doing, man. I'm reading, talking about philosophical ideas, religious ideas from scholars. And if I was in academia, you'd call that scholarship, but I'm not. So what is that? It's opinion scholarship, man.
Opinion scholarship.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so that's one thing.
Yeah, there's definitely, I like the sound of it.
Okay.
It's got a ring to it.
Me too. I'm not sure what we'll do with it, but something about that.
All right.
Also, I saw a trailer for History of the World Part 2 on Hulu. Did you see this?
No.
Do you remember History of the World, Mel Brooks?
Yeah.
Kevin, do you remember History of the World? He's nodding. So History of the World, if anybody who knows Mel Brooks, Mel Brooks did, help me out here, Young Frankenstein and
Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Robin Hood Men in Tights.
One of my favorites.
Spaceballs. Thank you, Kevin. What's the one? What's the one that's racist? Where he throws it. It's like a cowboys. He throws in the Blazing Saddles. Thank you. So he does all of this, Mel Brooks, and he's old now, right? He's old.
Yeah.
And so History of the World came out like, I don't know, maybe it was like in the late 70s or early 80s or something. It came out a long time ago, and I can tell you all I remember about that movie is the opening scene, and I still laugh when I think about it.
Yeah.
It's the opening scene is a bunch of
monkeys,
primates sitting up on this hilltop, and the sun is coming up. And so you have this time lapse thing, slow motion thing where the sun's coming up and the primate creatures are evolving. So it's like a fast motion almost, and you can see them evolving. And the moment they turn into human beings, they just start jacking off. All of them just start jacking off. So this is what I remember. In any case, now they're doing a sequel to it. It's going to be coming out soon on Netflix, and it stars Mel Brooks is in it, but it also stars Kroll.
Okay.
What's his name?
Nick Kroll.
Nick Kroll and Wanda Sykes, and there's like a whole bunch of comedians in it. So anyway, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that. I am not huge on sequels, especially nowadays, the way that they're just terrible.
Yeah.
But because this is Mel Brooks and it's been like 30 years, I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that it'll be funny, but I honestly, I pretty much any kind of movies or anything like that anymore, I expect just a bunch of like stuff that I'm going to disagree with, pushing agendas and stuff like that. And I mean, all of those people that you mentioned are super liberal.
True. But see, Mel Brooks is old school.
True.
And he was not afraid to make racist jokes during Blazing Saddles. I wonder what if you'll push the envelope.
I'll watch it. For some reason, when you said History of the World, I like glazed right over that movie and was thinking that it was like some documentary series or something. No. So, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm turning Kevin's mic up in case he has anything to say about History of the World. Anything?
So they he was on Celebrity Jeopardy.
You got to come closer, man.
I think it's Nick Kroll.
Yeah.
And he was presenting it on Celebrity Jeopardy like last week. And he was sitting there talking about it. He didn't really get into detail about what they were talking about, but they were just laughing about how they decided it was a good idea to make a sequel, 35 years later or whatever it's coming out. But I was very excited to watch this whenever it gets released.
Yeah, me too, man. I am very excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
All right. I don't know how his audio was because I couldn't really hear it in here. But anyway, okay, so we got Opinion Scholarship. We got History of the World. I wanted to ask you, can we bring up The Crucible one more time?
Sure. Of course. Oh yeah, we can definitely bring up The Crucible.
I think we should. Time. So just to refresh your memory, last week Kyle and I talked about a debate that was done that on the YouTube channel, The Crucible. That's what they do, debates. And I took some umbrage with the idea of debates in general. And so Kyle anyway reaches out to the main host's wife on social media so that they actually
both of them
listen to it, and that had nothing good to say about it. Now to be fair,
no, they had some good stuff to say about it, but it was all about me.
So, well, let's talk about that, because what I was objecting to about debate in general is this idea that when people are having a conversation, they have an opportunity to learn and grow mutually, or to own a motherfucker. And people who just want to own a motherfucker, to me, I understand that that's kind of part of what debate is about, but I don't like that. I don't think it's helpful. And so that's what I said anyway. And then they covered that on their podcast.
Yeah, so I wish I would have known that so what they did, it was a super show. They were like fundraising for new equipment. So it was a 9-hour stream.
Woo.
Yeah. He started at 3:30 and didn't end till like 12:30. And I was watching because I knew he was going to talk about it. And I had dozed off on the couch and I woke up and our podcast was on the TV. And I thought that YouTube had just started auto playing one of our podcasts. But then I heard someone else talking and I immediately woke up. And rewound the stream and started.
Oh, so they use clips from our podcast?
Oh, he just straight up played it.
Oh,
he
shit.
Just not the whole podcast, but a good chunk of it.
Yep.
And was just kind of picking apart your arguments. That's where Based Fat Chad comes from. He started off, he was like, now look at the screen right now. And I want you to tell me which one of these two guys you think is going to suck and which one of these two guys you think is going to be an absolute Chad.
Yep.
And the audience was like, the fat guy. The fat guy's going to be the Chad. And so that's where that name comes from.
Gotcha.
I was looking to get rid of Stony Wolf anyways. Yeah. It doesn't make any fucking sense. So yeah, they played it and Andrew was talking about it. He was, he's going to send me the clip eventually. So we'll be able to show it and you can react to it and whatever. He was definitely hard on you.
Yeah.
But not it was all in good sport, you put stuff out about him. So he's just responding to it,
Yeah. Well, to be fair, my critiques weren't specifically about him, apart from the thing I said about him smoking cigarettes and feeling a little bit aloof about it.
You also said at one point that you thought he did a shitty job of something. And I think when you watch it back, you're going to realize that there were certain points where maybe you were a little more antagonistic than you thought.
Maybe where I took the biggest,
which is fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but it's totally in respect on my end. I just wanted that to be clear. Sure. But one thing I did take the issue with is I said that if he wanted to have the best conversation with that guy, he would have helped him with his own argument, because he clearly wasn't capable of doing it himself. And instead of doing that, he just kind of laughed at him and made fun of him. And that's the part that I thought was unhelpful. That's the part that makes me feel leery about that style of conversation. And just to be perfectly transparent, that's exactly what Andrew did to me. So rather than engaging in critiquing what I said, and his wife did a better job, honestly, when she on Twitter, or YouTube, maybe in the comments, we were talking, and she's like, this guy doesn't understand debate or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's exactly the point I was making. I don't like debate. I don't think it's
the difference between not understanding it and not liking it. I mean,
yeah, maybe so. where was I going with that? Oh, so when he then goes to talk about this, his instinct is to make fun of me. That's exactly what I was objecting to about debate in the first place. The ad hominems, you're going to laugh at somebody so that the audience thinks you can't take him seriously.
I mean, he definitely did. There were some ad hominems and stuff like that, but it wasn't all that. He definitely pointed out that you contradicted yourself a bunch. So things like that.
But I said that. I said I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm being honest and open about how I'm actually digesting this and how I actually feel. And people all the time have contrary emotions, all the time have contrary intuitions. To be completely consistent all the time is to not let yourself think. And I think
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
To be completely consistent all the time is to not let yourself think, because eventually you can't challenge yourself. You get into an echo chamber. That's a problem.
I don't know.
Man.
I think that being consistent requires yourself to challenge yourself, like almost constantly.
Well, that would be the right way of doing it. But you can see my perspective all the time. Somebody who doesn't want to challenge their beliefs, like, let's say, a party line conservative or a party line liberal. Those are people that can be very consistent. As long as they just walk that fucking tightrope, they're very consistent. And how many rank and file conservatives or Republicans ever challenge themselves on anything?
That's the thing, though, is they're not actually being consistent. They think they are, but if they really analyzed what they were doing and the things that they were saying and the reality of the world around them, they would realize that they're not being consistent at all. And I think that is the value. That is part of the value of debate, because, again, the debate is not for the participants to change their minds. I think it happens, but most of the time you're, evangelizing. And I will never not think that there's value in that.
No, and I never once said there wasn't.
No.
So it's
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. I said more than once that there's value in debate, that you can learn a lot very quickly. Do you not remember me saying that?
Yeah,
I said it more than once.
You did say it more than once, but again, you were contradicting yourself. So I mean, a few sentences later, you'd be like, "I don't think it's good. I don't think it's
But you have to be able to clarify. Every statement is not a blanket statement, and somebody who pretends it is an asshole. Somebody who pretends it is trying to pigeonhole you, and that I'm not having.
I'm not sure how, though. I mean, in what way?
I can say that a debate is valuable, and I have problems with the debates, and both statements can be perfectly true, unless you take them as categorical, in which case I'm a hypocrite, and that's not fair. People are not hypocrites for having nuanced opinions about things.
Okay.
So I don't know. So, but my biggest takeaway, and I will listen to that. I want to hear what he has to say, and I want to do it in good humor and all that. But the fact that I would take umbrage with somebody being impolite, let's say, and then you turn around and are impolite about it, it's like you're just reinforcing what I said. You're just reinforcing what I said, and that's how I feel. And I'll let you know once I listen to it if I change my mind at all. But that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand where you're coming from. I think both you and Andrew are kind of like, I don't know, just digging more into the way that you felt before. Obviously you don't like debate. Obviously Andrew does like debate. Mm-hmm. So you both are just defending the positions that you find valuable.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think debate is wrong or bad, and I think it's fine. In fact, I think the best way for debate, the most meaningful way to do debate, is to say, if you have a complicated question or topic, you find the best equipped person on both sides, and you let them have that conversation. And then it's so much better than 1,000 less educated conversations. And everybody gets the benefit of seeing the best conversation on the topic. I think that's great.
That was kind of the position of Jason on the podcast yesterday, because we talked a little bit about that. And he said basically the same thing, that it's valuable to watch two masters hash it out. And I agree with that. But I think that there's value in, I guess not masters doing it as well.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm just imagining I probably just like that William F. Buckley, Gore Vidal one that we talked about, because for a lot of that, it was professional enough and it was courteous enough. And they were going back and forth with each other as you would expect them to. And then at one point, William F. Buckley says, "I'll punch you in the mouth." You remember that?
Yeah, I'll sock you in the face and you'll stay plastered.
You'll stay plastered.
Yeah.
So that's my point. It's like when you see somebody do that, part of the audience is probably like, "Fuck yeah, punch him in the mouth." But another part of the audience is like, "This guy's now lost my respect because he lost his cool."
The side rooting for Gore Vidal will think that. And they never had respect for William F. Buckley in the first place.
You don't think that there are neutral people that will lose it?
But I don't know, man. I do not like William F. Buckley. I said that on the last podcast. That being said, Gore Vidal spent like a lot. You said that they were cordial, but they weren't really. They were at each other's throats almost the whole time. Yeah. And I mean, Gore Vidal kept doing things like calling William F. Buckley a Nazi, and that is like a lot closer to Nazi time,
True. But can't you see how that is not helpful to the conversation?
I don't know. I think that it can be unhelpful and it can be helpful. It just depends on the situation.
It depends on what your goal is, I guess. But if your goal is to one up somebody, and
if somebody's really being a Nazi, is it unhelpful to call them a Nazi?
For the purposes of having a conversation, yes, it's unhelpful. If you want to get punched in the face, it's helpful.
So I think that a lot of times, especially when you are, in the business of broadcasting ideas out to people, sometimes you have to be on the attack. You know what I'm saying? It's a blood. You just think that everyone should have conversations in private and be nice to each other.
I just think if you can avoid violence and bad will, you should.
How do you feel about presidential debates?
I like parts of it. I especially like when candidates from the same party are arguing with each other.
Yeah,
because
the primaries are the best.
That's when you get the most interesting shit. But when you have the Democrat versus the Republican, those are usually a little bit less interesting to me. Not because the debate, just because of the way, like how they change their style from the primaries to the, to the big show. So it's more fun to see Democrats pick apart Democrats or Republicans to pick apart Republicans.
Okay. So how did you feel about the 2016 primary debates when Trump was out there just shitting on Ted Cruz and, little Marco Rubio and all those Jeb?
So I'm going to be biased in this perspective and say that I probably enjoyed that more than I should have. But the reason is because I then, and now even more, think that there's parts of our society that need to have their ass spanked, that need to be put over.
Welcome to the crucible opinion, in my opinion.
If you could get the right person, and I told you this, and if Andrew listened to the whole episode, he heard this, that there are instances where I would be completely on board with you, eating the popcorn next to you, enjoying somebody getting their ass torn apart. But that requires somebody to be an asshole first, usually, or somebody whose ideas are so despicable that in my mind, they need to be punished. They need to be exposed. And I didn't feel that way about that guy, man. I didn't feel that way about the guy.
George Martin?
Yeah. I don't know.
Whose name I can remember now?
Yes. I don't agree with him. In fact, I agreed with Andrew's point entirely. The argument he made about property, I 100% agree with.
The thing, I don't really agree that George Martin was being completely polite. He was being manipulative, and he was not engaging in what they had agreed to come in and engage on. So he was not being completely, he was saying nice words. He wasn't calling Andrew a prick or anything like that. But I mean, I said this a lot in the last episode. I really don't think that Andrew was being that impolite. I mean, at a certain point he did, he started, dunking on him a little bit, but for a long, he gave Andrew, I'm back to forgetting his name. He gave George Martin a lot of rope.
Yeah.
and George Martin hung himself with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, I was on Andrew's side for that argument. I just wish they could have had a different conversation. I wish George would have been able to get more of his opinions out. Like Andrew nailed it and it was very obvious from the very beginning. This guy is making an emotional argument. Well, that's what liberals generally do. That's what the climate crisis is. That's how their arguments are. They're always emotional arguments. That's what you expect from liberal people. That's what their personalities are like. So I kind of expect somebody who's going to defend this meatless future to be like that, to make an emotional argument. And Andrew noticed it and said it right away, called it out right away. So Andrew's making rational arguments, about property rights, and George is making irrational arguments about how he feels inside. And they're not arguing the same way, but they might have been able to figure out, like Andrew might have been able to figure out.
Do you think that George Martin was just too stupid to see what Andrew was trying to do and engage with it? Or do you think that he was like, obviously he wasn't saying this out loud, but do you think in his mind, he was like, I'm not going down this road?
I think he subconsciously wasn't going down that road, but I also think he didn't prepare to go down that road. He only had one argument and he was only prepared to make one argument, and that was the emotional argument.
Okay.
So when George said 10 minutes into the interview, I don't really know how I can argue any further. It should have been end of story to me. Like, end of story. You've lost. End of story.
I mean, I guess I can sympathize with that on some level, but I also think that the Crucible, they're creating content. They don't want a 10-minute debate.
Sure. No, I get you. I understand that. I get you.
And even after that 10 minutes, you don't like his style, but I think that Andrew was pretty patient. Like he gave the guy, like I said, he gave him a lot of rope and he hung himself with it. And at that point, that was the whole point of our conversation. It's like, eventually it's like, okay, if you're not going to be in this, then I'm going to tee off on you,
Yeah. You know what you said about George Vidal, what you said about Gore Vidal, calling William F. Buckley a Nazi. So I was called, in coverage of this conversation, a moral relativist. You remember this? Yeah. I was called a moral relativist. I don't think anything could be further from the truth, that I am a moral relativist. So to say that is like calling me a Nazi. It's like calling me a name without justification. And I don't think, maybe that makes for an interesting debate. Maybe it makes for a fiery debate, and maybe that's what he wants, and maybe that's good. But I simply don't fucking want that in a conversation. You're not going to get anywhere that way.
One thing I would like to see from you is, I know that you have a moral code, but I don't know what that moral code is grounded in the current like spiritual kind of position that you're in.
Yep.
I don't know where the grounding for those morals comes from.
Well, that's a great topic. So let me tell you as much as comes to my mind about this. I think that there are patterns in the world, in nature, and in your psychology that repeat, and they have to do with voluntary self-sacrifice. So we look at the world and we see the world as a unity. If you do psychedelics and have a mystic experience, you come out saying the same thing. Everything is one. But we see that even in our waking life, we see that everything is one. Everything's connected. The tides, the fucking, water cycle, the temperature, the fucking jet stream, life, everything. Cycles are connected and everything. And so when we do something like kill an animal to eat it, go back to the topic of that debate, we are taking a life to sustain a life. So there's always a sacrifice required to keep things going. The plants die in the winter and they come back up in the spring, and you can see this sort of, the world is self-sacrificial. And as a parent, you feel that way even more. When you have kids, you realize that your life is sacrificial. At that point, your life becomes a sacrifice to your child. Your entire life, every moment, every worry, every dollar you earn, every goal you have is now organized for somebody else. So I am pouring myself into my children. That's what I'm doing. That's required. Voluntary self-sacrifice. Now I can tie that back to Christianity and say that's what Jesus did. Voluntary self-sacrifice.
Sure.
So that's where my moral code comes from. living for others,
But
recognizing the unity.
why is that right? Like, why is that the right way to go about life?
Because it accords with what life is. It accords with the essence of reality. The essence of reality is self-sacrificial. So if you do not live your life self-sacrificially in alignment with the natural order of things, you will be unhappy. You will be depressed. You will be anxious. You will be, suicidal. You will be lost. And that message is so close to the Christian message that I fail to see how my morality differs from Christian morality.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would have to. It's very vague, you know.
It's like, thou shalt not kill. Why? Because you are me. That's what I think. I shouldn't kill you because you are me. So that's the basis of it. Thou shalt not steal. Why? Because you are me. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Why? Because you are me. It's all consistent to me. And all of that morality comes from, I don't want to say this is probably not true. Not all of that morality, but the impetus for this conversation comes from psychedelic experience. What
is, your brand of psychedelic spirituality have to say about things like, okay, so where do you land on something like homosexuality?
I think that I'm more liberal than you on this.
Yeah.
I think that when I think about something from the Bible, like be fruitful and multiply, if I think about that as a
my neck.
No, it's okay. As like a duty that I have to the cosmos. If I choose to be homosexual and I'm not doing that, am I doing something wrong? It's really tough to say. But if you ask me, do I think it's sin? By that I mean, do you think it's worthy of punishment or hell? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Do I think homosexuality is like socially disruptive? Not particularly.
You don't think so?
No. Do I think Jesus would say a gay man can't live in my community? No.
I think it depends on the gay man's behavior.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. I don't, we talked about it a little bit earlier with the Pride Parade stuff. I just don't want you copulating in public. I don't want, and aside from that, what I don't want is you getting a job as a public school teacher and teaching my fucking son that it's okay to explore that, because I don't believe that it is.
It's not the place of a teacher.
If you do, I think that there should be harsh consequences, to be perfectly fucking honest with you. Sure. If you're in a public institution teaching other people a way of life that they consider to be degenerate, and a way of life that, if you look at the reality of things, the reality is borne out that it's not good. That a lot of these people who say that they're happy, they have way higher instances of depression. Look at the trans community. Like, it's a fucking mess, man. Those people are not happy. They transition and they think that it's going to make them happy, but they never dealt with what the real issue is. So they're not happy. I don't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
I don't want teachers pushing that on my kids.
Yeah.
And if they do, like I said, harsh consequences.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think if an adult that wasn't a parent was doing anything to influence a young child's thoughts contrary to the wishes of their parents, whether it's in a public school, makes it worse. But even not in that context necessarily, is terrible. I mean, it's terrible. It's unforgivable, and it's like so arrogant. I can't even possibly imagine how somebody would think that it's like going back to there was an example I wanted to bring up. Oh, I saw it was a video of a lady, university chair, somebody, I can't remember. I see so many little videos talking about how children, there's studies that show children are capable of making decisions about their gender transition, while still children, that they can make rational decisions about their future. Now I'm all confused about where I was going with this. I wanted to make it.
Fuck that.
I wanted to make. I know. Fuck that. Fuck that.
How soon until they can consent to sex?
Exactly.
Fuck that.
Yeah. Fuck that.
And that's my point. No.
So there's an arrogance involved with somebody saying, I know best for your kids. There's an arrogance for someone saying, I know best for you, which is what government does all the time. And I wonder, you would agree with that, right? There's an arrogance involved in saying, I know best.
Depends. I mean, sometimes I think that you can demonstrate that you know best.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that's it. Do you not understand how what you're saying seems very subjective?
In what way, say?
I can prove to you that I'm right. But we're still like, well, let people do what they want. Again, do what you want, not near my fucking kids.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
But my problem is that like any kind of moral subjectivity, you have no ground to say that what I'm saying is not like, if you're a moral subjectivist, you can't agree with me.
Yeah, correct.
And if you try to, somebody's going to be able to pick it apart because you don't, things are not objective to you.
No, I do think that there's a lot more subjectivity than the conservatives will allow generally, and religious people will allow generally. But I do believe that there's such thing as right and wrong. And I do believe that there's more of a gray area than conservatives and religious people would like to admit. It's more complicated than cut and dry, black and white. But I do believe that there's such thing as objective morality, and that comes from our unity, in my opinion. And I think that's the message of religion. Already described that the basis of morality is the fact that we are identical. So love your neighbor as yourself, treat others as you like to be treated. That is the fundamental law. And, without a religious tradition and just my mystical perspective, you can make that same claim. Now, I happen to have both a religious perspective and mystical perspective, and I think they line up. But I'm not going to be comfortable being as cut and dry on many arguments as somebody like you, maybe yourself or Andrew. I don't know that. I guess if I am too cut and dry, I run two risks. One is I don't learn from the other person, and I might be able to. And the second is, I had another one here. I lost it.
I think that the thing about not being able to learn from people, I don't think that's true. I think that you can be, I don't know, was consistent the word that you were using? If you're like always consistent, or if you're too like rigid in your beliefs, I don't know, that you won't be able to learn. I don't know. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that I don't know, that you can come to understand something better. You know what I mean? Through listening to other people. Even if you are very, you've got your ideas, you've got your framework that you're operating within.
Yeah. I think it's important to listen to other people,
No, I know you do.
It's important to get the feedback from people. Otherwise you just become a megalomaniac.
But my point is that you were like making it seem like people who are very conservative, just they're not interested in that. But I think that like someone like Andrew, he's a very conservative guy. But he hosts a debate show. Like, obviously he's interested in listening to people. He's not just interested in dunking on people and making them look like idiots. Yeah. He's happy to do that, which I am too. It's funny that if you go back through this podcast and listen to it, I've always been more that guy, like the more firebrand kind of a person on the show.
Which is why I like to have you on the show, man.
It just kind of, like I said, lines. We're just kind of taking the sides that we had before and just like digging into them,
Yeah, I don't know if I am. I don't know if I'm digging, if I feel like I'm digging in. But I do think I only ever saw the one Crucible. So I do, and I said it before, I would like to watch more of those and get a better feel for them. That one instance of Andrew is all I have. I don't have anything else to compare it to.
You should watch some of the episodes where that guy I tagged you and I told him about your Young series, PF Young.
Yeah.
He does some debates on there that I think you would like. David Patrick Harry does some debates that I think you would like. I think what might be frustrating for you, and I think in a good way, because it might like make you like want to flesh that out for them, you know, like is listen to debates with people who are more in line with your thing, because I got to tell you, the moderators on the Crucible are extremely good. Even if they have a bias towards they do not express it.
Good.
And a lot of the people who say things like you say, they don't do very well, because it's hard to like base it on anything. You know what I mean?
So I would love to have those conversations, but if I were trying to if I was trying to have that conversation, I would be trying to learn what their perspective is that makes them feel contrary to me. I would want to learn and understand their frame of mind. If I'm trying to do that from my seat, and from their seat, they're trying to make me look like a fool, I'm out. I'm out.
I'm with you. If you are, we said this on the last podcast, if you are being good faith and you're not trying to make the other person look like an idiot, if they do that to you, that's shitty. I really do believe that.
Yeah. Don't you like, again, I know we're talking about debate now, but don't you want people to be curious? People, it's like, that's like what makes the living fun, is to be curious about things.
I want people to be curious, but this is what it's gone back to the entire time. If it becomes obvious to me that they're not curious, it's smash time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. Do you think George was not curious in that conversation about? Yeah.
No, he was not curious at all.
But did you think Andrew was curious?
Yes.
Really?
All the time. I think that Andrew is always happy to listen to someone's argument. But if it doesn't pass the muster logically, you can't let it go. You know, like I've recently had some tension with a couple people on Twitter because actually with the 2-Bit podcast, that how I got involved with those guys is they do a show called Friend or Fed, where they talk about a person describing whether they're a friend to the movement or a fed, which, you know, actively trying to subvert it from within, things like that. And they did one on Dave Smith, and the vast majority of it was very complimentary to Dave, because Dave's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And this guy, Clint Russell, like didn't even watch any of it and just saw that people were criticizing Dave Smith and like fucking flipped his shit, blocked a bunch of people. And I just like I just don't particularly like Clint Russell. I don't even remember why I brought this up.
I can't remember what track we were on.
It was something about debate. Oh, I think it was just like, I don't know. Basically, I think that Clint Russell is soft and he can't take criticism, like friendly criticism. I think that is what we were getting at. And apparently a lot of his fans are like that too, because it's like you criticize. Honestly, I've seen a lot of that from Owen Benjamin fans over the last 2 weeks too. It's like he did that debate, and it's like he, in my opinion, embarrassed himself and then continued to embarrass himself afterwards.
Yeah.
And a lot of the like, I love Owen. I've got love for Owen, but like I just, when somebody's wrong, they're fucking wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Learning when you're wrong is one of the hardest, but simultaneously best and most constructive things that can happen to you.
Yeah. And I think that when you are logically laying out a reason why somebody is wrong and they're la, you know, fuck you.
Yeah. Fuck you. I agree with that.
I think that's what George was doing.
Yeah. You know, so I'm coming around more to, I didn't imagine that George's reluctance to engage in Andrew's line of questioning was disrespectful or rude. But when you say it the way you say it, I'm starting to see why that might have pissed Andrew off.
Yeah. So that debate is interesting because I do think that he was subverting the debate, and he was doing it in a way that like somebody like you is going to watch it and be like, man, Andrew's being really mean, even though this fucking idiot is not participating at all. Now, a lot of debates you're not going to like, because a lot of them are very contentious. Like I watched a panel debate last night about the topic was women should raise families instead of concentrating on careers. And they had, like 3 right-wing people, 3 left-wing people, and it just like quickly degenerated into like people talking shit.
Yeah.
A lot of those panel debates can get kind of chaotic.
They can, yes.
You have to have like a really good moderator. And that guy, I actually like the moderator, Rob Noor, but that was just like a particularly contentious one. But I do have one more thing I want to ask you about this.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, Andrew is doing another super show.
Okay.
If I like messaged him and was like, hey, since you featured us last week, if we'd be willing to come on, would you be interested in that? Would you be interested in doing that
tomorrow?
I
mean, I wouldn't say no.
It's a lot. You got a wide window, 3:30 to potentially midnight.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would just need to know what we were talking about. Like what I need. I mean, it can't just
be like the criticisms that you had of Andrew.
Oh yeah, I suppose we could.
Yeah, I mean, I figure he's got like 9 hours. He might need something to fill that up.
Yeah, I'm not against it, man. I probably would have to. I mean, I would like to listen back to our conversation.
Yeah. I was hoping
and
I'd have it by now,
his
but
critique. So,
yeah.
But hey, I know we're at time. We're like 4 minutes over, but I want to ask you one other thing. I just want to get your take on it because I thought it was kind of interesting. One of the Weinsteins was on Rogan recently. I can never remember which one is which.
Eric.
Did you listen to it?
I've seen clips of it.
Okay. So I listened to this Eric Weinstein episode, and he's a smart guy, and it's interesting, but he's also like, he can be a little hard to follow at times. He's also very smart, and you're not sure whether he's hard to follow because he's jumping around or because he's so smart. I don't know, but he talked about a bunch of things, including UFOs. But one of the things he said, it struck me as interesting. It struck me as something that you might appreciate. Because I'll tell you, let me just tell you. He said, there's been no progress in physics since the 50s. That was the first thing he said. And you might wonder about that because technology and everything, seems to be a lot better. So what does he mean that physics hasn't progressed? He just means that once they got to the point in the models they have with quantum mechanics and Einsteinian gravity, that we've made no further progress. We've found ways to apply all that stuff. And, he said basically, if you take screens out of the picture, how has our lives changed since the 70s? If you take screens out of the picture, we live exactly the same lives we did in the 70s. But if you take the same time period, backwards from the 70s, how different. So basically what he's saying is that when we come up with breakthroughs in physics, it allows us to apply that knowledge in ways that change our lives significantly. And if we're stuck from the 50s without progress, we don't realize, like what we're missing out on, what possibilities could have been made real by now. And his frustration is why have we not made progress? So he says that, he basically says that, like academics, they get locked into a certain paradigm. And then if you try to go out of the paradigm, like Graham Hancock, you get completely ridiculed and not taken seriously. So that's what people are doing. He calls them good scientists.
Yeah.
So good scientists sit around rehashing all the old shit that doesn't get us anywhere because they're not allowed to go outside of the good scientist territory.
You ready to go to conspiracy land?
Before I do, I want to get to the point that I think you might like.
Okay.
Weinstein said physicists used to be cowboys.
Okay.
And I was like, yes.
Einstein was a weird looking cowboy.
Well, think about like Nikola Tesla, for instance. Think about like Francis Crick. Think about like Marie Curie. That bitch died.
It's very disrespectful.
That bitch died of radiation poisoning. I've heard that her skin was hanging off of her fingers. I don't know if that's true, but she was doing like, these people were doing like science in their garage. This is like Steve Jobs level science. Like what is that word that clandestine, right? It's like clandestine science, and they could get away with it because they weren't regulated and they could do whatever they wanted. But the thing is, interesting things were happening. And the reason I thought you might like that idea is because you have a love for people like Fear and Loathing. What's his name?
Hunter
S. Thompson. Those kind of people. They're like heroes for you. Those sort of people. And he's basically saying that's what we need now. We need cowboy physicists now.
That kind of fits into a thought that I just had. So I'll say the conspiracy world thought.
Yeah.
So you've got your materialist scientists. Everything is just matter. If you think anything other than that, you're crazy. And then you have the people who are kind of on the fringe. And what do they all have in common? Some kind of element of spirituality, some kind of there's more to this than just atoms and quarks and gluons and shit.
Yep.
And my conspiracy thought is, what if the reason they're constantly squashing that stuff is because if we make that next physics innovation, that discovery, it proves the metaphysical?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
I wonder, like maybe they already know. Maybe they already know, and they're like, if people start getting too close to an experiment, they're like, nope, that's canceled.
It's a fucked up conspiracy theory, but you can imagine if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody in power, that if you have to now share your authority with a higher reality, you lost your authority. If you now have to prove your moral
100%.
compass against the metric of some divine moral compass,
And I think that lines up nicely with like the cowboy element that you were talking about. You want to talk about cowboys? Talk about Russian Orthodox Christians in the Bolshevik era. That was some cowboy shit, man.
Yeah.
That's brave. That's like Jason talked about this on the podcast the other day. Being put on your knees in front of a letter that you have to sign that says you're going to operate within, the Bolshevik terms, and saying, glory be to God, and they pull the trigger and you're done. And then the people who don't die continuing to practice their faith underground, that's cowboy shit.
That is cowboy shit.
And it like that spiritual element, that's seems to me a lot of the time what they're trying to squash.
That's interesting. I guess we can end with yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yeah, we can also end with I guess this is going to be in the live tab now. It's not going to be in the videos. I also created some playlists. So if you guys are looking for the main show, this one, that's got a playlist. If you're looking for Chris's solo episodes, that's got a playlist. Solo episode them up. But there'll be more.
So Kyle's solo shit is one of the topics I had. We'll save that for later, but I am excited about that.
I got another Kyle's spiritual reconstruction.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, man.
Fuck yeah.
And it's always tied in with that guy Rhett McLaughlin from Good Mythical Morning.
Oh, I can't wait.
They do it every year. They do an addendum to it. So
really, listen, I want to shout this out for the audience. Kyle did what was it called? Kyle's Spiritual Reconstruction.
Yep.
So he did an episode in season 1. It was just by himself, and it was terrific. So I'd encourage you guys to check that out.
Is that still on? They fall off eventually.
It's not on YouTube, but it should still be.
Definitely.
It should still be on Spotify because
I got to figure out how to convert that stuff over.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Converting. I'm a tech tard, man. I don't know anything.
Yeah, if anybody wants to help help us figure that out, email us at to the two tongues podcast @gmail.com.
So one thing, I'm sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Now, one thing that would be cool is if we could find somebody who is willing to help us with this. See this thing here, team.
Yeah.
You can have people like setting all this stuff up for you. Like the guest is obviously for someone you're talking to.
Yep.
But it'd just be cool if we could find someone to do that.
It would be cool if Kevin would do that.
Yeah, man.
All right.
The producer.
All right. So I'm at Two Tongues Pod on Twitter.
He's not Kyle. He's not
Kyle is Fat Chad.
Big
old Fat Chad
right over here.
Yeah. Okay. Whoa. Well, there we are. All right. I guess that's enough for the live stream.
Yep.
Peace, and I'm out.
Adios.